Welcome to the Intentionality Gurus Podcast, where we explore the science and art of turning untapped potential into strategic impact. I'm Karen Hale, and along with Candace Pollock, and today's episode is titled Backwards, Forwards, Both Sides Now. I can't wait. Now, stepping into the new year, some of us are setting ambitious goals, while others might feel hesitant or even disillusioned, remembering all the resolutions that fell by the wayside in the years past. But what if we looked at things from both sides now? Like Joni Mitchell sang, so many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. What if those clouds, the self-doubt, perfectionism, or all or nothing thinking could clear, giving us a new way to reflect on where we've been and where we want to go? So in today's episode, this is what we're going to explore: how to use the new year as a meaningful time landmark, a creative tiered yardstick approach to goal setting that prevents the dreaded success or failure trap, and how to anchor your goals in what you want to be your North Star for the year ahead. So let's dive in and rethink what it means to look forward and backward with purpose and perspective. And Candace, I am so excited about this coming year because so many people that I have talked to in the last couple months are walking around fearful, and they're afraid of the mistakes they're going to make. And if we can look at all sides, maybe we'll make fewer mistakes.
That would be the hope. And in fact, they may just be learning frames of reference, because we do, as humans, tend to think in black and white thinking, all or nothing. We're just hardwired that way because it's the way that we can remain the safest as a rule, but it also can limit us and perpetuate the sense that, what's the point? I'm not going to achieve what I want to achieve, or it's just too much work. It's too hard.
Exactly.
So this theme occurred to me when I read something about looking back. I've been bombarded with all sorts of things saying, look back on the year and what did you learn and so on. And I certainly have engaged in those things and I've gotten a lot of benefit from it. But my thinking has changed over the years in several ways. So we're going to address the time landmark concept, and then we're going to be looking at tiered goal setting, so it's not the all or nothing, and basically, orienting ourselves to who we want to be, so that we can embody it and have other things align. So the time landmark thing has been something I've always used. It was just easier for me to basically see the before and after. So think of it like, things east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi, or the Rocky Mountains, for instance, north or south, America, any of those things. So it can help us have a context for what we're doing. And Dan Sullivan talks about it in his Strategic Coach program, where he talks about the gap and how we often, when we're gauging ourselves, measuring ourselves, think in terms of, we set a goal at some remote time in future, or maybe not so remote. And then as we approach it, or maybe even accomplish it, we tend to think that we haven't moved forward enough because the mirage occurs in our thinking that we're still afraid of that we're not going to be where we want to be at some other point in the future.
Sure.
And his suggestion is look at where we came from rather than looking how far we are from the thing we say we want, because that thing tends to morph and become bigger and further away, even though originally we may have been pretty precise about what it needed to be, like lose 10 pounds. Well, maybe we lost 5 pounds, and that is something to be celebrated, but we're thinking of the idea that we didn't lose the 10 pounds.
Right.
And, what
Right.
what can we learn from that? So any of that sound familiar to you?
Oh, I mean, just talking about the weight itself is something that I know I've had to teach myself to celebrate, every half pound, every pound.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't many years ago. And so I was on that, projection of, oh, I have to lose 25 pounds, oh, I've only lost 5. That's not good enough. And then I'd go back to eating again.
Right.
Um,
And what's the use? That sense of resignation and failure, if it tends to go that far. Yeah.
exactly.
So, what has always worked for me, some people would say, oh, I don't set resolutions. And there's a lot of articles about how they're not effective and so on. And, all of that may be true, or it may be false, or somewhere in between, a little bit of this or that. But what I have always found useful is to see things in context. And I've always used the new year in terms of what I want more of and what I want less of.
Okay.
All right. And so that, anything in the direction of the more is good, and anything that takes me further away from what I don't want is a good thing.
Right.
Yes, it's less precise in terms of a specific dollar amount or a specific time spent or a specific outcome, but just having a time landmark before New Year's and after New Year's, what is it I'd like to see more of or less of? So what lands for you in that, if anything?
Well, I'm not one for resolutions. I'm one for setting goals, creating maps of where it is that I want to be. Um, and including in that, getting away from the things that I don't want to do anymore. Um, my issue typically becomes one of I keep adding the things that I want to do, but I keep falling back on not getting rid of the things I don't want to do. And so,
Yeah, I share that, and I mean I'm really good at adding, more,
right,
more, more, and more plates in the circus that I'm spinning and so on. So, what is it about resolutions that keeps you from doing that? And that's not a judgment statement. That's
um, for me, resolutions have always been um, too dependent on other people or other things happening. Um, Goal setting for me is this is for me, not for anybody else. So maybe it's the way I look at it. Um, but in the past, and one resolution I remember um, in my first marriage, um, I made a resolution on New Year's with my ex-husband, and I said, um, I'm not going to raise my voice this year. I'm going to learn to control it. And I was doing it for him, not for me. And I found myself getting louder and angrier more and more. But yet, when I left the marriage and realized that that was part of my personality, I set some goals to stop myself from getting as angry and keeping my voice more level. So to me, because I set a plan, I could do it. Whereas the resolution was just, this is what I'm going to do, but I didn't have a plan in mind.
Yeah, so it's a perfect example of I'm going north, but north to where, is a resolution. Whereas a goal has some specificity around it, either time frame or direction or, all those other elements. And it suggests, but it's not always the case, depending on how people set goals, that you can recognize it when you get there.
Exactly.
I often use the analogy of, I coach small law firms and small business owners in terms of all sorts of things that come up when you are the worker bee as well as the owner bee. And often they will say they want, more support from their team, more cash flow, more, X, Y, or Z. And then they wouldn't necessarily know it when they got it. Or another example is team members who theoretically are supposed to show up on time for the weekly meeting and they come in and they put their stuff on the conference table, you know, maybe a few minutes late after the top of the meeting, and then oh, I have to go get my coffee. Oh, I have to do this. So the analogy is, what if we were watching a silent movie? How do we know that the person met the standard? If we watch a silent movie without subtitles, how would we know just from the actions and what's going on the screen that we met that standard?
Right.
And that's always served me well. And so on. Not, that I don't deviate from, all the things I say. So I can be a deviant on those things, just like anybody else.
Oh, sure.
So in terms of resolutions and goals, yeah, the idea is there's something more precise about the goals. But one of the things I wanted to explore in the conversation today is, to what end are we seeking this goal personally and professionally? So what is it designed to do? And often I see, particularly with small business owners, they want more money. Everybody wants more money. They're not necessarily thinking in terms of more profit, and they're not necessarily thinking in terms of, what I'm sure on some level there's a connection in their brains that if I have more money, then I get X.
Right.
But it's not necessarily explicitly declared in their own minds or thoughts. And that's where the second element in this backward, reflection, looking back on the prior year, like what can we discern from that experience? Where did we hit our goals? Where did we theoretically fall short? And what are the lessons it has to teach us? So where does that show up in your mind?
So interestingly enough, over the last couple of weeks, I decided that I wanted to go back into reflecting on my coaching business and what it is that I want to accomplish with it. Initially when I started, 3 years ago, my thought was, I just, I want to help people move forward the same way that I'm moving forward, and use the tools that I've learned to assist others. And I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it at, I don't even want to say speed, but my process was not good. Let's just put it that way. Yes, I had some successful clients, but I wasn't feeling successful. So I had to go back and look through it all. And sometimes when you reflect backwards, you think to yourself, wow, look at all the mistakes I made. But instead of doing that, I looked at all the steps I went through and started identifying which ones worked, which ones didn't, and if they didn't, why didn't they? Was it the way I implemented them? Was it the actual step? And so I'm now creating a new structure because I know where I want to move forward to, but I don't want to get rid of everything I've done in the past because some of it is still good, but it just needs to be tweaked. So, and I will tell you, it was a harsh reality as I was doing it, because I kept thinking to myself in the beginning, look at all these mistakes. And then it was like, wait a second. No, I've learned from them. So I don't want to call them mistakes. I want to call them learning experiences.
Sure, exactly. So, some of the things that we've already kind of touched on is, what goals did you achieve? What worked? Why did they work? If we can discern that, all without, blame or whatever, we can celebrate that stuff. And by celebrating, we're actually signaling to the brain, we're releasing neurochemicals that are telling the brain, oh, this is something that we need to be on the lookout for, more opportunities like this, because it's getting a little dopamine hit. And it likes dopamine. We can incentivize it to be a bit of an addict along those lines and incentivize us to do more in that direction. And then the goals that we didn't achieve, without, blame or judgment, basically say, analytically, well, why didn't they work? And often we don't have the systems to support those things. It's more or less throwing a dart and seeing where it lands, but we don't have a way to make sure that it lands or increase the odds that we're going to land there.
Right.
And then the last piece that I think we don't give much attention to is who were you being? How were you being when you were successful? And how were you being and who were you being, if you can understand that phrase, when the things were not successful? So what shows up there?
Um, so interestingly, you know, I'm not good at looking at my successes. I just do them and I'll say to myself, okay, yeah, you did that. But I'm more in tune to looking at what I think are my mistakes. And in the past, up until the last couple of years, mistakes haunted me. I just, oh, I made it once, I'm going to make it again because that's just who I am. But in the last couple of years, I've gotten to the point of, was that, I made a mistake, okay, and try to figure out why I went that route. And maybe I look at it and say, hey, that was not a mistake. That was intentional. Or, okay, it was a mistake. How can I change that going into the future? And it just seems to become more and more natural the more I do it. Um, and I guess if I were going to make a resolution for 2025, it would be to continue on the path of being intentional and being able to look at things and not causing me to backslide if I don't like what I've seen in the past.
Yeah, so a couple of things occur to me. So one is humans are hardwired to seek the negative feedback because that's what keeps us safe, physically as well as emotionally and intellectually. That the brain is hardwired to, hear the snap of the branch, because the analogy they always use is, the saber-toothed tiger may get us. And if we err on the side of being too optimistic, we may get gobbled up. And if we err on the side of being extra cautious and vigilant, and looking for the negative things, well, we will survive. We'll pass on our genes and, and so on and so on. So it's literally hardwired in us. So one, we can just recognize without blaming ourselves that, okay, yeah, I'm looking at the negative things, but I can then couch it in terms that are going to serve me, not just keep me stuck worrying about, what could go wrong. And then the other part is to, again, the neuroscience behind things to, when we have something we've done, I'm thinking of the BJ Fogg's, system of creating tiny habits, anchoring a time when we can reflect on the day and celebrate the things that have gone well. Because neurochemically, the brain doesn't know the difference between something that we revisit in our thoughts and we can reinforce the chemicals we're releasing, the feel-good chemicals or the negative chemicals. And it can't distinguish between the things that are happening to us in the moment or the things that we anticipate are going to happen to us in the future. So we can use that, say, I don't know, when you brush your teeth at night, to reflect back on the day and say, what can I celebrate that occurred today that I want more of in my life? So that's where the intentionality comes in terms of how do we create a system that actually supports the things that are going to keep us on the path of what we want more of, or because we're displacing all the stuff we don't want
Right.
with that stuff and so on. So we've talked about the BJ Fogg system and so on in prior episodes. So I'm just going to encourage anybody that's listening that celebrate the things that went well, and just pass by the things that didn't go well and just say, oops, needs work. It's nothing more than that without dwelling on it too much.
You got it.
Um, the other part that I wanted to share is what I call tiered yardstick approach. Basically, when we're setting goals or whatever you want to call them, somebody taught me this years ago, not the tiered thing, but I used to be a paralegal and I was reviewing files all day and trying to expedite them for various law firms. And a mentor I had from Columbus, who had been in that business for years, taught me that she said, this can be mind-numbingly boring work. and you have to build in a cheap thrill. And I was such a young kid at the time, I didn't really know what she was talking about. And she said, it's something that an outcome you can produce by asking or doing or whatever. And if you get it, it's a stretch, it's a reach. But if you get it, you feel kind of giddy. All right. So it might be to ask a caseworker, hey, can you work on this today? Could you get this done today? Which would be a pretty bold thing to request of a caseworker. And but I got really good at it. And in fact, I had a couple of cheap thrills in that phase of my life, and certainly since then, but one in particular in that phase. Well, actually, I was an attorney at that point, where somebody called me and asked me to take a hearing for them. They didn't want to drive up from Columbus. And so I agreed to do it. And he said, it was a settlement conversation with the opposing party. And he said, I'll be happy if we can get $1,500 from it. So anyway, I saw the person who was the decision maker. I agreed to do the hearing, and I saw the decision maker, and I looked at the case, and the client wasn't going to be present. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to ask for $20,000 just to see what I could get. So I did, and there was silence. And then she came back and she said, I'll give you 15,000. So, I'm still giddy about that. It was such a preposterous thing to ask for. I had nothing to lose. I knew that, at a minimum, if I walked out with 1,500, he'd be happy with it. So that's an example of a cheap thrill. What's something that's maybe beyond our comfort level and so on? The fallback position is, having in mind going into that scenario or something similar regarding our goals, what would be our fallback position? The thing we probably could achieve with some diligence and structure around it. And then the hostage situation. This is what I call the hostage situation. Like, what can I not, refuse to leave the room in essence, or the conversation, or whatever the scenario is, without taking hostages. I'm not literally taking hostages, but I'm not giving up any more ground. I have to get at least this out of it. So thinking of some of your goals or non-resolutions, what might show up there for you?
Well, interestingly enough, starting off this new year, um, I wanted to add 3 more shows. And, I knew who I wanted to include in those shows. And my fear was that in the beginning, it was a deep fear that um, one of these people was going to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to go off on my own. And then here was going to be this great podcast that, I wanted to do here. And so um, I approached it with, this is how you go do it on your own. And this is how I can help you if you come to New Cleveland Radio. And I really built up a great way for them to do it on their own. But they saw that it was really better for them to join us. And it was like, I didn't already have them. I didn't have, I hadn't announced that they were going to come on. So I wasn't really losing anything if they decided to do it on their own. But part of me felt if they were going to do it on their own, I wanted to give them the tools that they were going to need. And I did. I mean, laid it out with everything. And it was like, they were grateful. I had done it the right way. And talk about being giddy. It was like, I'm just so excited to have you on have you part of us now. So, you have to go in with the want to win, but not be devastated if you lose.
Well, and to define, that we would never be losing, because just being in the conversation is a win in and of itself. But the idea that it's not black and white, all or nothing thinking, that all of it would be a success, including the hostage position, just to be really intentional and clear. Okay, what is it that we're going to do here? And that has never failed me. Once I kind of that approach evolved. And I just had this is how I would prepare for every hearing I did as an attorney or any negotiation and so on, so that I was really intentional and clear about um, this is like a fun, giddy success. This is a success at that I would love to have, and then this is the minimum thing. But even when I had to resort, so I've had some situations that were losers, but I couldn't not make an argument. I
Right.
had to do what I could do. And sometimes that hostage position in my mind, being prepared for this is the bare minimum I can walk away with, helped me get the cheap thrill because it was all dialed in, so to speak. It wasn't just kind of shooting from the hip. And then, basically the next thing I wanted to bring here, which to me speaks to me more personally, more deeply, in terms of, what's it all about, Alfie? Like, why do we do these things, set these goals? What is it about us as humans? And the question is, our North Star, either for the year or for our lives and so on. And this was inspired by something I read about, who will you be when you're 80 or 90 or whatever, 50, 60, 25, whatever the year is, but shifting from the what will I do to the idea of who will I be and the embodiment of it. And so in one of the groups that I have many, coaching certifications and so on, but in one of the early ones, it was all about embodying what we say we want to do and how we want to be in our um, uh, energy, our physical being, in our work realm, whether that be volunteer or otherwise, and then in our relationships. And so that's always resonated for me. So the idea is when we're doing the recap on the prior year and planning for the up and coming year to really reflect on, who was I then? Who was I being? And was I being timid? Was I being self-deprecating? Was I somehow letting others, intrude on my boundaries, all without judgment, just noticing. And then how was I being, who will I be in this up and coming year, and how will I be able to utilize that? And then look at that shift in our orientation, just expanding our field of vision of not just the doing, but the being. So where might that show up for you?
Well, it's interesting because there once was a time that I believed you are who you are. It's not like you can be who you want to be. And um, I've taken on this mindset that I can be whoever I want to be. Will I actually reach that pinnacle? Well, if I don't keep moving towards it, I'll never reach it.
Mhm.
So it's about moving towards it and um, knowing that it's okay that I'm going to slip a little bit along the way because I'm not maybe the best mountain climber. But if I just keep moving, I'll get there. And especially over the last couple of weeks, since most people know that I had an injury on Christmas Eve, and it's like my first thought as I was lying in the ambulance going to the hospital is okay, tomorrow it'll get better and then it will keep getting better. I had to keep saying that to myself. And that's because I've taken on this notion that I'm not going to stay where I am right now. I want to keep growing. I want to keep being the best version of myself.
Yeah, and it's the feeling of it and so on. So imagining yourself at the key time landmarks and so on throughout the year, going forward, how you want to feel and show up. And it's a matter of orienting yourself to who you be, your identity. And so for in that program where I got certified, my identity, my energy identity was bristling vitality. So I was looking for more opportunities to feel that. When I used to row years ago, I was fit, and I just felt like, energy was pulsing through me, and the fittest I probably have ever been. And I was a reasonably, active person and so on. And somebody misheard me and thought it was blistering vitality. It wasn't blistering, it was bristling.
Ah,
But it, I can feel it, whenever I just use that phrase to myself. So I'm going to do X and feel that again. And I have, other identities, but it's based on the values and your ideas in terms of how, you be. And then the last thing, just to like kind of bring it home, is putting it into practice. So using the time landmarks like New Year, or it could be Valentine's Day, it could be anything. It could be each week as a stopping point, a pause point where we look back and look forward, just to kind of recalibrate. Like as sailing. If we want to go north, we can't go straight north. It's not like a highway that's blasted into the topography. We have to tack a little left and right, and eventually we'll get north if we know what we're doing with sailing. And then the tiered yardsticks, so that we are always building in some level of success. It may not be the big jump all the time. And then anchoring our resolutions or goals to your identity and your values and who you want to be, not just what you do. And writing it down, so that's our North Star. So the reason it works is all of these coming together can be adding, a starting point, where we're starting from for reflection and planning, a way to have a practical framework that we can just incorporate in our life, that, will feel empowering. And there's a concept that if we can build the benchmark small enough that almost any idiot, my phrasing, not theirs, can achieve it, then we're going to be priming ourselves for more success. But if we over promise for the time frame in place, then we're setting ourselves up for more discouragement and less success. And then finally, that deeper layer, like what's it all about, Alfie? Like, why are we doing it? That identity-based sense of change. So, thoughts about today's conversation?
well, I'm now anxious to go back and look at some of, the goals that I've set and, reflect on them and see how I can continue to make them reachable.
So, in saying goodbye to the audience today, anything else we need to say?
Well, we want to thank you all for joining us on this reflective journey in backwards, forwards, both sides now. As we step into the next chapter of the year, remember this: your past doesn't define you, but it can teach you. Your goals don't have to be perfect, but they can inspire you. And above all, the North Star you set, who you want to be, can guide you through the clouds. If you enjoyed this episode, which we know you did, I'd love for you to subscribe, share it with someone who might need a little extra inspiration, or leave a review. If you're ready to explore these ideas more deeply, stay tuned for the Intentionality Gurus Self Sabotage to Self Command Boot Camp later this quarter. Now, that's something that I need. It's designated to help you clear those clouds and move forward with clarity and confidence. Until next time, be intentional. Have a great day.